Thank you so much, Peggy and Blessing, for leading this session. I'm going to be sharing my screen to share the outcome of the research. So in November 2024, that's just last year, we conducted a research. We're very curious about these gender issues in our community. And that's really led us to conduct a research across Africa to understand the current state of our community, and especially from women, and also to inform us in our strategic direction as a women organization. Yeah, so that led us to conduct this Africa Wiki Women Technical Research. This is the first time we are properly presenting the outcome of this research. And we felt like this is a very interesting, important occasion to do that. So we want to acknowledge the people who contributed to this research. We have these users, myself, Peggy, and Wiki, the co-founders, and then our fellows who really did amazing work on this research. We also had Ajosi from Senegal to also help us with translations and community engagements for the French community. So what led us to this research? Like I mentioned, we are seeing a lot of gap in our community in terms of even content and also participation. At the moment, we are seeing that 23% of biographies are related to Africa women. And there's so many things that we needed to understand in terms of what the challenges are, what is leading to this gap, and why are we not seeing much progress in terms of women participation and contribution over the years, although we see that a lot also is being done to push the women agenda, but it hasn't really moved forward significantly. So in December 2024, we held 2 regional conversations for both Anglophone and Francophone. And they were participated by 77 and 86 participants respectively. And that was a good turnout. We had so much coming out from these conversations through a Mentimeter survey. We also conducted a focus group discussion between 10th to 17th January 2025, where we had 12 participants and 11 participants for the Anglophone. And these focus groups were divided into smaller groups. So some of the occasions we had 2 people, some of them we had 3 people. A maximum of 4 focus groups each was held for a smaller group of women, and just women only, because we wanted women to feel safe and to express themselves. And none of the co-founders were in those meetings. We tried to bring neutral people who will make participants feel further comfortable, so that we are not like, me. So I think it was really good. There were really good discussions that came out from those conversations. And participants spanned from these countries: Benin, Botswana, Burkina Faso, Congo, Cote d'Ivoire, Gambia, Ghana, Guinea-Conakry, Madagascar, Mali, Senegal, Namibia, Niger, Nigeria, Rwanda, Sudan, Tanzania, Togo, Uganda, and Zimbabwe. That was a great diversity that we had during the focus group discussion, which I felt was really good. So in terms of the methodology that was adopted in conducting this research, we used a mixed method approach. And that meant that we gathered qualitative data and also quantitative data to understand also things that we didn't really capture in the quantitative data, or allow people to express themselves. So like I already mentioned, we held 5 focus group discussions. We had a survey for people to fill. We held 2 regional conversations. And we also had a gender campaign mapping exercise. That was an icing on the whole research. What we had wanted to understand is, what are the main gender campaigns happening across Africa? And what does it feel like? So we wanted to understand that level of engagement in terms of gender in the Africa community. So let me delve deep into the results and analysis. So in terms of the quantitative report, we had roughly about 169 people responding to the survey. And majority of women showed interest. And so we could see that majority of the women showed up to channel their voice through the survey, making up 65%, and males made up 34%, which really was very interesting, because it also shows that women are more interested to, they saw this as a great opportunity to also channel their voice through the survey. And another interesting thing that we also noticed in terms of age is we saw that the men participation were really within the mid-age, younger age group. You could see that 50% of the men were between 26 to 33, and women participation tend to spread evenly, except for 42 plus. We didn't have a lot of people, which shows that our community seems to run more between the younger mid-age group. When people begin to go past 42, we don't see them anymore. So yeah, that's just I think I could hear some voice. Can we mute, please? Yeah, so again, in terms of the people that participated in the survey, we saw that a larger majority of participants were from Nigeria, followed by Ghana, and then Democratic Republic of Congo. And other countries were Senegal, Togo, Botswana fell between 5 to 11. And then respondents that had fewer than 3 respondents were Kenya, Niger, and Libya. And that also, I think some of the challenges that we also had in terms of low participation in these other regions, because we didn't really have a lot of representatives in these regions to engage community in the grassroots. So I think that was also what led to the low participation. But nevertheless, we're also seeing that in terms of editors, we see that more of the participants, we try to use a percentage, because we understand that there were more women that joined the survey than men. So we needed to assess this thing fairly, the survey fairly, by using percentage. So 65% of the women who joined or who participated in the survey said they were editors, and 72% of the men also said they were editors. So it felt like there were more people, there were more of the men who were editors than the women. And when it comes to affiliate representatives, there were more women who were more like affiliates, or working with an affiliate, than the men. And then when it comes to organizers, everybody felt like they seem to have the same percentage. So we wanted to discover some of the findings that was made in terms of key challenges women face when participating in Wikimedia movement as an editor. So these were the challenges that were reported. So we tried to segregate how the men are thinking around this question and how the women are thinking. So we just asked, what challenges do you think women are facing? And 50% of the men feels that women lack awareness about existing opportunity for women, and more women than even the men also felt it more, which is 62%. Then when it comes to mentorship, more women feel like they lack mentorship. That is 57% of the women feel they lack mentorship versus 48% of the men who think women lack mentorship. So again, these numbers seems to be high on both sides. Then limited access to resources was also reported by the women. That is more than half of the women feel like limited access to resources was also a challenge. So more women again than men think this way. And when it comes to lack of time due to many responsibilities, more women feel like there's lack of time due to many other responsibilities apart from wiki responsibilities. And it's surprising me that the men don't think that we lack time. So 33% of men voted that it's like they feel like no, it's not lack of time. Well, the women are in their own shoes and they say it's other responsibilities that is also contributing to them, but the men don't think other responsibilities is what is contributing to them. That's why we have low number of men voting for this. That was really interesting to see. The lack of digital skills. Women felt lack of digital skills is also one of the reasons. I think for lack of digital skills, both parties seem to rate the same way. And also limited leadership opportunities, both parties felt the same way. Then when it comes to lack of recognition, it's dropping. So which means that the women don't feel like lack of recognition really is a main challenge, but the men felt like lack of recognition for women's contribution is kind of a challenge. So the men felt this more than the women feel it is. So that's also some kind of discrepancies here that needs to be further investigated. And lack of self-confidence, again, it keeps dropping. So the women are saying it's not that they lack self-confidence, because just a few women are voting for lack of self-confidence. But the men more than the women feel like the women lack self-confidence. So lack of engagement, lack of self-confidence, lack of encouragement. The women feel like that's not really the issue. Well, lack of educational opportunities and leadership role for women. So in terms of educational opportunities, they are saying no. So it's very low, 26 and 26. Then gender bias, 90 and 90. So it keeps going down. And women's low level of education, they feel like the low level of education is not the issue because just 13% voted for that. And then traditions and roles. So they felt like traditions is not also the reason why they are not participating in the Wikimedia movement. So we're seeing that the thing that was really highly voted for was lack of awareness. The women felt like there's lack of awareness. We saw this also in all of the focus group discussions. They talked about lack of awareness. And I'm like, how aren't they aware? So there's something that we are not doing right in terms of awareness creation, mentorship, limited access to resources, lack of time due to we need to find the time. I think for the time, some of the women who talked about it during the focus group discussion was talking about the time that these events has held. They conflict with their other responsibilities in the house, especially on Saturdays and also some of the times in the weekdays. So it's something that we really need to look at. And the lack of digital skills and limited leadership opportunity. I think these were the highly voted for. So again, we wanted to also understand the involvement in women-focused campaign. We see that less number of women participated in such campaign compared to men. So again, when it comes to women-focused campaign, more men are joining. So this particular question was to each participant that answered this, you know. So more men feel like they are involved in women-led campaign than women, although we see that more than half of the women still voted yes, that they were involved. And when it comes to no, more women are saying no. So again, they are not, they've not involved themselves in any women campaign. And the men also, I think about, sorry, I need to pull this thing. Okay, I think about 90% also said no compared to 33%. So a lot of women again said no, they haven't participated. And those who were not sure, well, it's just a few number, but more women compared to the men were not sure. When we also wanted to assess how they feel in terms of support in the Wikimedia movement, how do they feel? So the question we asked them, do you feel well supported as an editor in your wiki community? So this question again, it didn't matter whether we were a woman or a man. We just asked everybody, do you feel well supported as an editor? And amazingly, the men say yes, because a lot of the men feel very supported. And just half of the women, so more men feel supported than the women. As you can see, 50% of women said yes compared to 66% of the men. And when it comes to somewhat, we also saw that 24%, I mean, the same number of people said somewhat. That's 24%. That's also like a significant number of people feel somewhat. They are not sure whether it's support or it's not support. They are not really sure. Then when it comes to no, more women said no compared to men, which is 14% and 10%. And those who felt neutral, again, more women than men felt neutral about the support. They are not sure. So that's 13% compared to 2% of the men. So it also tells us that there's also a lot of gap because half of the women spread in different responses, like somewhat, no, neutral. Half of the women spread across these responses. So we wanted to also understand what projects are these women or these participants, generally, not even women. This question didn't ask specifically about women, but we wanted to understand what projects they've been involved in. We see that the project that is highly contributed by the participants is Wikipedia, with men leading by 81%, and then women 75.5%. So again, we see more men contributing to Wikipedia compared to women. But the interesting thing is that there was a switch when we entered Wikimedia Commons. We see that more women love the Wikimedia Commons, with 73.6% of them, compared to 65.5%. And then it switched again. When it comes to Wikidata, we are seeing more men in contributing to Wikidata compared to women, which is 75.9% compared to 65.5%. Then when it comes to wiki codes, we see that there's a switch again. The women love the wiki codes. So we are seeing 42.7% of the women saying they contribute to wiki codes compared to 32.8% of the men. So that's how it went. So these are the three major projects. And then you can look at the rest. Wiki Voyage. For Wiki Voyage, we have more women contributing to Wiki Voyage. We have more women saying they are contributing to MetaWiki. Of course, when we saw in the first, we saw that a lot of organizers, Wikimedia affiliates said they were women. Okay, so maybe that is also because as a Wikimedia affiliate, you should know how to edit on Wiki. MetaWiki. Anyway, that's just by the way, not compulsory. So we have Wikisource as well. We see a lot of women saying they contribute to Wikisource compared to men. We see for Wiktionary, a lot of women again contribute to Wiktionary compared to men. Then Media Wiki, we see men almost the same as women. Then Incubator, even though the numbers kept dropping to a very few percentage of people, you could just go through and glance through the rest. And Wikipour didn't even have any woman at all. So we see that there are a lot of even general gaps in participation when it comes to these all these other projects that we see low contributions on. Then when we asked them about the languages they contributed, we also wanted to understand, like, in terms of languages, when we say foreign languages, maybe like English, languages that are not related to Africa languages, we saw that majority of the women were leaning towards the foreign language compared to the men. And when we compared both languages, like those who contribute both, example, English and local African language, both at the same time, we saw that majority, again, was men. So there was a switch when it comes to those who are contributing both sides. And those who contribute to only local languages was low, which means that contributions really hovers around these areas. Either they are contributing to foreign languages or a mix of it. So we also asked participants which area of support do they think will be most beneficial to increase women's participation. So this question, please understand for me, is for women. So we wanted to show how the men are thinking for the women and how the women are thinking for themselves. So participants were asked what area of support they think would be most beneficial to increase women's participation in Wikimedia. And when it comes to funding for projects, we saw that a lot of women said they needed funding for projects. And also, this was also something that was raised during the focus group discussion. Women are asking for support and more projects that aligns to their interests is something that they really feel will be very helpful for them. And the men also felt the same way, although the women's votes were kind of a little higher than that of the men. And leadership development, the men feel like the women need leadership development, even more than the women, who said 60%. But then again, it also tells us that more than half of the participants were in line with the fact that leadership development was key. Then when it comes to mentorship, the women shut up. They were very loud about it. And 71.8% of the women felt like, hey, we really, really need this mentorship thing. We really need to be mentored. And during the focus group discussion, this theme ran through all the conversations that we had. A lot of the women felt like we really need mentorship, we really need guidance, especially from other women mentors. So instead of maybe having all male mentors, they also feel like they need some kind of mentorship from their fellow women because they understand them better. And the women also felt like we really need networking opportunities. And this brings me back to another important thing that was raised during the focus group discussion about collaborating with other women from other regions, learning from each other, because some of the women that were interviewed were even organizers, but they felt like there's a lot that they need to learn, and they felt like cross collaboration, cross learning can really empower them to bring back those skills into their respective communities. So that was also one of the things that was highlighted. Then organizational skills, when it comes to organizing skills, They also felt like a lot of the women, more than the men, felt like the women need more organizational skills. And again, when it comes to training and technical skills, a lot of the women were loud, and even the men, they were like, women really, really need training and technical skills. So that was highly voted. And I think from all the points here, this received the highest votes, then followed by mentorship, and then funding for projects, and then leadership development. So those were rated very high. Mhm. So when it comes to how effective do you think the current efforts in empowering African women within the Wikimedia movement? Um, Very effective. We had a lot of the men saying it's very effective compared to women. So this again brings an interesting gap, because if you look at the men, feel like the current effort in empowering women is very, very expensive. The men were like, it's very effective. But then there's a sharp drop, which was really strange, because the women, which voted, 25% of the women only felt that it's effective. So if you look at the gap between how the men are saying the current efforts for empower women in our movement is effective, there's a very big gap, because see, 25%, the women don't really feel that way. But the men feel like, oh, they are doing their best. There's a lot that is happening that is supporting women. So again, there's a whole lot of discrepancies here. When it comes to somewhat effective, 5% of the women and 2% of the men, sorry, 5% of the men and 2% of the women. Then somewhat effective, somewhat ineffective, okay? So when it comes somewhat effective, the women were like, we're lean more towards the somewhat effective. So we have quite almost the same number of women saying somewhat effective compared to men. So 37% of women compared to 36% of men said the current effort is somewhat effective. So they are like, okay, it's kind of somehow effective. Then when it comes to neutral, there's also a sharp gap. A huge number of women were neutral compared to men. So whilst the men feel like the whole thing is very effective, the women felt otherwise. And even more so, when it comes to neutral, they were not even sure what exactly is happening. So they haven't really felt the effectiveness well, because they are neutral in between somewhat and neutral. If you look at somewhat and neutral, they make up almost 70 plus women. If you compare the women that said somewhat and neutral, that's that's a majority of the women leaning towards somewhat effective and neutral. They're not sure. But somewhat effective and neutral seem to be the same thing. So yeah, again, there's a whole lot of gap, which all of these point out to that there's a gap to be filled. Again, when it comes to participants were asked why they think Africa Wiki women, or why they think African Wikimedia can improve its impact in Wikimedia movement. These were some of the response that came. We're looking at how can Africa Wiki women improve its impact in the Wikimedia movement. They talked about, they voted 80% for develop more leaders who are women, collaborate with other Wikimedia affiliates to increase visibility of existing women. 83% voted. And when it comes to gender-focused campaigns, we had 63% of the entire participants voting. Provide safe space for onboarding women in the Wikimedia movement. We have 59% of them. So still more than half of the people felt this should be our responsibility. Then providing digital device and financial support to enable participants participation and reduce barriers. We had 72 That was really high. So it means that what they are saying is we should be able to maybe collaborate with other organizations to get devices for women, because devices gap was also one of the things that was really mentioned in our focus group discussion, in our I think some of the questions that we made it free for women to give us ideas, they were mentioned. And then also financial support to participate, to reduce barriers. The women felt like some of the financial support that were mentioned were like childcare support or transportation support and to attend events and all of that. Some of all of these were mentioned, or data stipends during the discussions, and provide more targeted mentorship program. So again, if you look at the mentorship, it runs through all, and voting very high. Again, when we talk about mentorship, there's a high vote, which all points out to the mentorship gap in our movements, because 80% again are saying, yay, mentorship should be something that we should really wave our efforts in and really take it seriously, because there's a huge gap when it comes to mentorship for women in our movement. So providing mentorship opportunities for women is also very important. So targeted mentorship was mentioned. And I think one of the reasons why the targeted mentorship too was mentioned was also has to do with, like, when you look at the diversity in the Africa continent, we have people speaking different languages, different backgrounds, and different kinds of needs. So they needed some kind of targeted mentorship to address each women's needs. So the targeted mentorship was highly voted for in this feedback. Then collaborate with media to ensure more publications for women's content. Again, when we see that writing about women is a big challenge when we don't have reference. So reference is very important. So maybe collaborating with media houses to do that will be very vital. And then provision of digital device and financial support. I think I mentioned that already. Awareness of the movement wasn't really voted. Again, it surprised me. Awareness of the movement wasn't really something they feel like we should be really worrying ourselves on. And data subscriptions typing, most people are unemployed and living below poverty. And they didn't feel like this is the reason for us to do this. Then work with structures that promote women and gender in, to highlight the actions undertaken within the network for women. So again, it wasn't really important. Going to the grassroots to induce women at local level, it wasn't really voted for. So if you look at the main thing that were voted was the leadership, mentorship, and also campaign gap, provide space, safe space for onboarding, and targeted mentorship. And then providing digital devices and financial supports were key. So some of when we opened up some questions for them to tell us what's other examples that we didn't capture in the options, they talked about these things. Participants identified gaps that existed in empowering women in the Wikimedia movement. We classified them as both external factors and non-external factors. So the external factors may be factors that maybe we might not easily control within our reach, but we can try. We saw digital divide. They talked about the digital divide. Some women in the rural areas not having access to internet is also a challenge. Then digital literacy gap, access to device, infrastructure, all of these things were mentioned. And then the other things like traditional gender roles, lack of awareness, gender biases, harassment and safety concerns, leadership and representation. These were some of the gaps that they think exist in our movement. Okay, so there were additional feedback that were provided, and this is how we try to present them. Then when it comes to sustainability wise, women perceive greater need for initiatives to amplify. So we brought out some example of initiatives that they think we should establish or push. And we saw that if you look at this diagram, you see these are the levels, the magnitude. So this is a small magnitude. So right from 3.2 to 4, it showcased the various magnitudes in which participants felt. So all of this has to do with women. But then when you look at the difference, when you look at the female, which are in the blue line, when you look at the female, which are in the blue line, the magnitude was higher compared to that of women, that of men. The women's magnitudes were higher compared to men. So again, let's go through one after the other. When it comes to Wiki women showed, sorry. So when it comes to the women involvement, let's say Wiki women should establish a mentorship network where experienced women Wikimedians can guide newcomers, offering regional insight and support. We had the women voting 3.9 over 4, which was really, really high. And when it comes to Africa, and then the men were voting 3.5. The men don't really feel like Wiki women should, they don't, and we saw it in the previous slides that how the mentorship perspective was different. Men didn't see really a lot about mentorship compared to how women felt the need for mentorship. When it comes to Wiki women should conduct annual community evaluation within the Africa region to identify the evolving need of Africa women contributors. Again, the women were almost at 4. They almost hit 4. They were like, yes, Wiki women should conduct annual community evaluation within the Africa region to identify the evolving needs of African women contributors. So it means that they are asking that this is something that we should really look into, having, let's say, an annual evaluation where we are trying to understand women's evolving needs and also which area of concerns they have, and allow them to address or channel their voices through these surveys. They felt really important. And when you look at the men, their votes were kind of down, okay, compared to the women. And Wiki women should provide a safe and supportive space for women editors within the Wikimedia community. Again, the women, although felt was high, wasn't as high like the previous ones. You could see that Wiki women should support and provide a safe and supportive space for women editors was also highly voted compared to the women, but not extremely like to 4. You could see that it was hovering around 3.8 over 4. And Wiki women should work with Wikimedia Foundation and Wiki Women Task Force to advocate for region-specific guidelines and initiatives that promote gender inclusion across Africa Wikimedia communities. Again, they voted also around 3.8, high compared to women. So the women were like, yay, this is it. So I believe we all know the Wiki Women Task Force in place and how they are going to be working to address gender issues in the community. Wiki Women should establish an award and recognition program to honor women who make significant contribution to Wikimedia inspiring others to join. Again, they voted it high that we should really organize something like this to recognize the contributions of women in this space. Then Africa Wiki Women should facilitate onboarding more women into the Wikimedia movement through partnerships and collaborations with external organizations to increase participation. So they're also looking at us being a body that would onboard women from the outside world into the Wikimedia space through partnerships with other organizations, and all of that. So I think it's also really great. So when you look at all the levels of responsibilities that we suggested, more women felt like this is really important compared to how the men felt. So it also tells us why we are also seeing a lot of gap, because the men understanding of how women feel in the movement is different. Because this clearly shows how the men have been thinking about women's participation and how women themselves think about their participation. There's a huge gap. And let me just deep dive into the qualitative. So that's just about it with the quantitative results that was gathered. Let me delve briefly into the qualitative, and then I'll be done. So we had some research questions to guide us during the qualitative. Please.
Na obia on email.
Listen.
Sent the other emails.
Hey.
So I carefully blocked out.
Please, are we okay? Are we safe?
Yes, sorry for that. I'll close the.
Okay, I'll be done soon. Okay. So these are the questions that guided us. We asked them, what are the biggest challenge women in your region face in contributing the Wikimedia project? What are the strategies to promote women contribution and address existing gap in Africa? And do you think women are actively engaging in Wikimedia projects and activities in your community? What recommendation do you have to ensure greater representation of women in the movement? So briefly, there were several themes that came out. One of the themes that I was really surprised that ran throughout all, including the regional conversation survey and even the qualitative data, when the qualitative focus group that was held, everybody was saying lack of awareness. So I'm like, we have Wikimedia user groups in almost most of the countries that we have. So the women are still complaining of lack of awareness. I was really confused. But then again, it also tells us that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of awareness creation. Because we really need to take the way that the world is going to, it seems like a lot of online awareness, social media engagements. We need to develop a proper strategy to create awareness about Wikimedia movement, about Wikipedia, and how women can be involved. It's very important that we strategize when it comes to awareness creation, because lack of awareness was really a thing that ran through almost all. Another thing that came up during the focus group discussion was cultural and social barriers. And they also mentioned the fact that traditional gender roles of women restricts them sometimes in terms of even decision making. How if they have to come and participate in an event, who decides what, and sometimes there are natural roles like having children, when you start having children, and then your time gets very limited because you need to share your time with your baby and family and everybody that matters around you. So we need to find ways that we can still be strategic to engage such women to stay, because traditional gender roles shouldn't stop any woman from being part of our movement. Our movement is not for those without traditional gender roles. It's for every woman, including those who have gender roles. So again, a lot of strategy needs to be developed around this to be more targeted. outreach. Yeah. Then they also talk about gender stereotypes, discourage women from interacting with men. Sometimes it can feel some way, especially if you're a woman and you're asking questions, or like sometimes it can be intimidating sometimes, because some of the things you want to ask is like, somebody will say you've been in the movement for 2 years, you don't even know. So being in that highly dominated male environment can be some way for women to come out, and how they are also tagged. Okay, so we should be careful about some of the stereotypes that we associate with women in our movement. And challenges in assessing references was also a big issue. We want to write about, I remember some time ago, we wanted to write about women, and there was a whole women list, but anytime I clicked on the woman I tried to search, there was no reference, just some scanty reference that will not qualify. I know that will not even allow these admins to approve the article, so I stopped. And I tried 3 times. I was like, wow, this is really serious. So these women are notable, but we don't have references because media is also not writing. So there's that systematic existing gap already on the internet generally. It's not even from Wikipedia. Wikipedia is not the reason. It's the internet, the journalists, and everybody that is writing about these women are not writing well about women like they are writing about men. So again, like some people suggested that we should engage journalists and educate them and empower them to write more about women. I think it's a very good thing, especially women who are notable and they don't have anything written about them. Then we have systematic and resources. So they are saying that lack of essential resources needed to participate in Wikimedia activities, they struggle with poor internet. So internet infrastructures in their community are very poor, lack of access to quality devices. A lot of the women, it was really amazing for me. They were saying they don't have devices to join. And you know that having a laptop is one of the things that can really allow you to contribute well. And not everybody can, even having a smartphone can also help you to contribute well. But we're seeing that there's a gap when it comes to good devices, the quality. So they can even have phones, but it's not as quality for them to contribute. Even to talk about laptop was even scarce for a lot of them. They complained. And as a lot of the women leaders we engaged during focus group discussion were complaining that the women in their community don't have devices. So we are seeing that there's a whole lot of gaps around device and internet. Then time constraint due to work, family, and domestic responsibilities were also highlighted. Women have domestic responsibilities. And so the men, as they are being served by the women and they are editing, they should also remember that these women are the ones also taking up a lot of responsibilities in their home and are not able to edit. So we should find a way to support them, try to understand. So I think trying to understand your community well, try to see which area of support will be better, which times will rather work for them to join trainings can also help, because they have a lot of responsibilities in the house and family wise. Then when it comes to other responses, develop tools to acknowledge and measure impact of women's contribution. This was also some of the things. What are the strategies? These are some of the strategies that they mentioned. Develop tools to acknowledge and measure the impact of women's contribution. Appoint more Wiki women ambassador globally to provide leadership and representation. So one of the things also they mentioned was having a working group in respective countries, a women-led working group in respective countries to mobilize women in those countries and channel opportunities through them. Then leverage mass media workshops and capacity building initiatives to empower women. As you can see, based on some of these things, we launched the Africa Wiki Women Scale Up Workshop, and they're asking us to also, these recommendations are open to all. Leverage mass media. So media engagements are very important. Workshops, capacity building that are tailored towards women are very important. Develop and prioritize women-led campaigns and initiatives that address women's issues. So we should prioritize campaign, especially women-led campaigns to address women's issues. Do you think women are actively engaged in Wikimedia projects and communities? Women are underrepresented in Wikimedia activities due to various reasons. So motivation, limited resources, all of these were mentioned. Dominance of men in leadership position was also mentioned. There are misconceptions about Wikipedia. Some of them have a lot of misconception. And then for some people, it was about security issues, organizing events. Some, I think a few countries like Sudan and co said that it was harder for them to organize Wikimedia events or host an Wikimedia event due to security reasons. For some of them, they would have to ask permission from the government to be given or to be authorized to organize these campaigns. So what solutions can be done? So let's talk about the solutions. Centralized programs to sensitize and empower women and paired with long-term mentorship opportunities, and develop and implement working policies that promote and support women's leadership and empowerment, and also leveraging social media platform and media houses to educate African women about Wikipedia. So I think that was also something that was very important, because the media needs to help us, because without them, we can't write about the women. And collaborating with external organizations to build synergies that promote Africa women activities and provide resources to support. So trying to get support through external organizations is also very important, and creating inclusion or shared spaces where women can exchange ideas and self-reflect. So creating that exclusive space for women only is something that we're also looking at launching this year, where we can help each other. Even when there's an article about women, we can all edit a bit of it and make sure that the article is pushed together. So having that editing community, which is all women empowered, because we want to have that safe space to feel free. It's something that we're also looking to launch before the end of the year. And inclusive policy implementation, ensuring adequate representation through policies, at least a female member per working group. And Women in Africa Annual Conference was also something that came up, that we should have an all-women conference in Africa, where women can come together. Then Wiki calls for women, so specialized training, certification to recognize, to equip African women with the needed skills was also something that was, yeah. So I think that is how the research went. Through several recommendations from the research, the Africa Wiki women's impacts can be strengthened by mentorship and capacity building, community and awareness, engagement awareness, digital inclusion and accessibility, organizing regional women's summits, leadership and ambassadorship programs, partnerships and collaboration with external organization, content creation, platform campaign and recognition, research and evaluation for continuous improvement. So these are the focus area based on some of all, if not all, the main highlights from the research that we had. These are the main areas that we see where our impacts can be channeled. I think that brings me to the end. I think I've mentioned all of these already. So that brings me to the end of the presentation. Thank you for taking a lot of your time. I decided to take my time to go through, because we're going to be sharing this aspect of the research to separately for other people to also benefit. And so the need for me to go through all of them. I would hand over to Blessing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mentor Ruby, for this wonderful analysis.